We've talked a lot about the action of the fly rod and the benefits of a full flexing rod over the last few months and beyond. Bamboo rods are the epitome of a rod you can feel, and today you're going to find out how to choose your next bamboo fly rod. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Hey, how's it going? I'm Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing podcast. I've been fly fishing since I was a little kid. I grew up around a little fly shop and have created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in this country. I've also interviewed more of the greatest fly anglers and rod builders than just about anyone out there. Chris Sparkman is here today, founder and owner of Sparchimedes Bamboo Fly Rods. He's going to take us on a journey to choosing your first or maybe your next bamboo fly rod. We're going to find out why the 5-sided Penta style bamboo rod might be better for you than the Hexa style. We're going to get some information on the differences there. And we're going to talk about the perfect length of a bamboo fly rod. We're going to walk through what it might look like for you and your area, why you might go with a 9-foot or maybe even a 6-foot bamboo rod. And we're also going to get into some great resources if you want to take this conversation further, and some other people you might want to connect with to put together your next bamboo rod. Plus, we're going to find out whether a bamboo fly rod has what it takes to battle a giant Alaskan salmon. Chris is going to talk about some trips he's excited for this year. All right, here he is. Let's get into it. Chris Sparkman. How you doing, Chris?
Very well. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on here. I heard about you, I think, for the first time through a good friend of mine, Brandon Farley, who we did an episode. We did multiple episodes, but we did a trip out to Virginia, and we've talked a lot about it because we fished Mossy Creek, and that's where I met Brandon, and we talked about kind of everything he has going, Project Healing Waters. I know you're involved in a lot of that as well, but you make bamboo rods, these amazing rods. So I want to talk about that, today. And maybe help people understand a little more about, if they get into it, what to choose. But before we get there, for you, how are things going? Let's just start there. You're out in Virginia now?
Yeah, things are going well. We've got a snowstorm going on right now, so I'll be out plowing this afternoon probably.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's a snowstorm? What's this look like?
We're about almost a foot deep now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are they predicting? How much?
Fair for here. Well, they're predicting maybe 12, 14 inches.
Yeah.
So we're kind of on the back end of it now.
Yeah, you are. And is that pretty unique, or do you guys get some snow every year?
Not every year. It's been about 3 years since we've had a decent snow.
Right. So that's probably a good thing, right? I don't know, I guess the snowpack isn't probably as much of a thing, or is this going to help some of the streams and the looking out?
It's going to help them a lot because we've been into some dry conditions the last couple of years, and the water levels have been very low. So I'm looking forward to some higher levels when I get out there again.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that was when we did our trip, which was late last year in the fall. And yeah, things were low. That was part of the challenge. I mean, we still got into some really nice fish, but we had to kind of pick places. It's kind of interesting, right? But that's good to hear you guys get some snow. So, well, let's talk about, first, let's just talk about the fly rods. Let's just start off there. Maybe talk about the name of the bamboo rods and how you kind of got into that.
Okay. Well, the name of my company is the Sparchimedes Rod Company. That name came from being a math teacher, and it's a nickname one of my students gave me one year after talking about the mathematician Archimedes. I know I've been fly fishing since I was a kid, and I've been rod building since I was 19, from blanks. And for me, it was just kind of a natural progression, I guess, about 15 years ago to start making bamboo fly rods.
Right. So you were making what, just graphite before?
Yeah, fiberglass and graphite blanks. I'd put them together,
Yeah.
Did that for many years. I probably built over 200 rods.
Oh, wow. Okay. And what was it like, the transfer from graphite to bamboo? Was that a pretty big change?
As far as the making goes, yes. I was kind of shocked at how much work it takes to make one. And so I learned how, but then I put it off until I retired to really get into it because it takes so much time. But it's a loving passion for me to make bamboo fly rods. I almost get more joy out of making them than I do fishing them. Not quite.
Right. Not quite. How many do you try to do a certain number, a year, or do you have a kind of a limit that you look at that you can do?
I really don't. I just can't seem to stop. So I just keep making them. In 23, I made 20 rods, and that is a lot.
Yeah. What does that take for one rod? How much time does that take?
Between 50 and 60 hours, because making the blank itself is, that's about half of the work. But after you have the blank made, then there's a lot of work to make it into a fly rod. So
yeah, we've had episodes. We've done a few, like I mentioned. I'll put a link to a couple of those where we talked about the whole process of making a bamboo rod. And I know there's a lot of good resources out there for people. But I wanted to touch on a little bit on, if somebody was getting into it. I think bamboo, the cool thing about it is, and we've talked about this on this podcast recently, that a lot of the industry in fly fishing has gone to faster and faster graphite rods. And we had Chris Korich on, who's a fly casting coach, and he's like a champion. He talked about how the rods are so fast, it's like this nuclear arms race that people can't even feel the line anymore, and it's like not a good thing. And I know bamboo is different, right? You have a full action rod. Is that the case with yours?
Yes, and I agree completely. When graphite first came out in the 70s, I remember casting some then, and then later on casting some old ones from then. And they were much nicer for casting, because when you take that back cast, you feel when the rod bends and is ready to go forward. They were just much more pleasant casting tools. That's what fiberglass, the recent resurgence in fiberglass, I think has been a good thing for fly fishing, because those rods are responsive like that. You know when to bring it forward. And some people say it's forgiving. Well, I see what they mean by that, but it's the old style of fly casting. And for me, it's a much more pleasant experience out on the stream when that rod responds and I can feel what it's doing without really looking at it, without really looking at my loop. And that's what I like about the bamboo rods too, because it just brings back all of that.
Right. Yeah, because you feel it. You feel it in the. No, it's cool, I think, and we're really pushing that this year to let people know, if they haven't heard yet, that that is it. Because I didn't realize that. I was even thinking about myself back, same thing. In the 80s, when those were those first generation graphite rods, which were actually really great rods to learn with. And then, like we said, it kept getting faster and faster till where it is today. So I think bamboo has a lot of benefits for people out there. Maybe let's talk about, let's say if I was, calling you right now on the phone, because it sounds like you have a limited number of rods that you could make per year. I'm not sure if there's a waiting list on that, but if I was going to be calling you right now and we're talking and I'm interested in a bamboo rod, what's that process look like? What would be the first question? How would you walk me through it?
Well, I would ask you, first of all, what do you fish for and where do you fish?
That's a good question.
And what's your favorite type of fishing? Are you a nympher or a streamer or a dry fly fisherman, or all?
Right. That's a good one. So I would say, just on my example, kind of a little bit of everything, I think. Obviously, swinging flies is always great. Nymphing. I mean, I pretty much do it all. And I think trout is mostly, what I'm focusing on if I at least look at my home water. Probably like a 6-weight, rod is what I'm typically using, just your standard. And, if I was to use that all around. So that's kind of, I guess, how to answer that.
Okay. But as it happens, 6-weight is my favorite rod to use. And so, I make a couple of really nice 6-weights. I make an 8.5 foot 5-strip bamboo rod. The 5-strip bamboo rods have a little bit more backbone to them, but still have the flex of a bamboo rod. And it's a very pleasant rod to fish with. It's my favorite. So it sounds to me like I would have exactly what you would be looking for.
Yeah. And what was the rod? Because we had that rod on the trip when we did our driftless trip. Brandon came up there and we had it there. What was that? Do you remember what that rod was that he was using?
Yeah, that was an 8 foot 5-weight.
Okay.
And for the driftless, that would probably be a very well suited rod.
Yeah, that's right.
And that rod, as far as bamboo rods go, is a very fast rod, even though it flexes way more than a graphite. But for bamboo rods, that's very fast.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. Now, Brandon's rod is an 8.5 foot 5 weight, and it flexes a lot more, but it still has plenty of backbone, and I think it's a more pleasant rod to fish with.
And is the backbone, where does that come into play? Is that the 5 strip versus the 6?
Yeah.
Describe that. Yeah.
Yeah. Most bamboo rods are made in a hex pattern, 6 triangular strips glued together so that the cross section is a hexagon. And while that's great, and many thousands and thousands of bamboo rods have been made that way, mostly because that's the easiest way when you use a hand plane. But the drawback to them, and it's not I wouldn't say a drawback, but you have parallel sides, 3 parallel sides, and you've got glue lines that go all the way through the center of the rod from one corner to the other. And so when you flex them, they tend to flex more. Now take a 5-sided rod, and you've got a flat side opposed to a corner side or an apex. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So you'd have one less corner and side.
Yeah, one less corner. And so you don't have any parallel sides.
Oh, right.
And there's no glue lines that go all the way through straight. And so when you flex it, all of those sides are fighting each other.
Right.
And so it gives you just a little more backbone.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
That's not to say that the hex is inferior by any means, but the pentagonal, or Penta as we call them, does give it a little more backbone. And for me, when you have a full flexing rod, like the 5 weight that Brandon has, or the 6 weight that I was describing, that extra backbone, while it's still flexing, it's quite a difference. It gives me a little bit more confidence out on the stream.
Right. And that might be better for windy conditions, things like that.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. So it sounds like the 5, and do you call it a 5 strip rod?
We call them pentas.
Pentas. Yeah. So the Penta. So the 6 weight Penta would probably be the rod for me. Are there other rods so you got the Penta that are, say, I don't know, 3 or 4 sided bamboo, different, or even maybe more?
Quad is getting pretty popular. It's actually, the quad is more popular than the Penta.
Oh, it is. And now the quad, you'd think the quad would be, now it's parallel sides again, so maybe you lose that. But why would the quad be good?
The quad is very strong because on the side, you have your guides facing downwards. So on the side, you got a wider strip. It's very strong. I've cast some quads, and I personally don't like the feel, but there's a lot of fishermen out there that do. I have the equipment to make a quad, but because I haven't been impressed with them, I haven't done it myself.
Sure.
There's some great rod makers out there that do make quads, and they make very nice rods.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. And
I wouldn't want to, put anybody away from getting a quad. If they're interested, they should find somebody that has them and cast them.
Yeah, give it a shot. Give it a shot. That's cool. So obviously you are a resource, but it sounds like you have a limited amount of rods you can make per year. But well, maybe let's answer that question first. Right now, if somebody's listening and they're really interested in learning more about this, what's the best way? Do they call you, or do you have, any availability? Is there a waiting list?
Well, at the moment, I don't have a waiting list. They can call me. My cell number is 703-772-2958.
Okay, good. And yeah, you don't have website, social media, any of that stuff. How does that feel in this day and age? Obviously you have a business going, but being able to do that without having to do the social, does that feel pretty good?
Well, to me it does, because I really don't want to get overwhelmed with orders. When I first started selling in 23, I did get kind of overwhelmed. And so, I sold 11 rods in a very short period of time, and I was hammered. I'm a retired math teacher, and I enjoyed being retired, and I do enjoy working in my shop, but get a little bit of pressure. It's
right.
I'm basically a hard worker, so when I have something in the queue, I can't stand just letting it sit. So
yeah, you got to get it done. Okay, and are there other resources if you didn't have any availability? Are there other? I know there's other bamboo rod makers. Do you point people in other directions, or do you know other rod makers out there?
I know a lot of different rod makers, and yeah, I could, depending on what they want, I could certainly suggest a rod maker or two for them to ask. On Facebook, there's several groups involved with bamboo rod making. And so if people look that up, they could find a group, join it, and then contact rod makers through that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and I would assume, just like anything, there's different levels of quality, and that's just something where I guess how would you figure that out to get a high quality bamboo rod? How would you know if you're talking to somebody, if they're at the level you need? Or I guess could you look at the rod? I guess it'd be hard, right? Because if you're doing things online, I guess, again, going by, I don't know how you do that.
Well, if you peruse those groups, you can see what other rod makers have suggested to people when somebody's looking for something.
That would be an easy way. Okay, that's perfect. And you could just go look up what bamboo fly rods, right? Fly rod groups.
Yeah.
Fly rod forums. Probably the forums would be a good place to go.
Yeah, there's one called the Classic Fly Rod Forum, which I'm in, and it's got all of the top makers in
it does?
The country, and some from Europe.
Yeah. Oh, good. So we'll get a link out to that one, the Classic Fly Rod Forum, in the show notes so people can take a look.
That's a great resource.
Okay, perfect. Good. So we got got at least one good resource going here. So back to that rod, and we were talking about the 6-weight. What else would we be talking about if we were on phone here and I was setting up, we know now it's a 6-weight. So what about the length? You got 8.5 foot. When would you go shorter or longer on the length?
Okay. For a solid built bamboo rod, 8 foot, 7.5 foot, 8 foot is kind of the sweet spot in castability. You get much longer than that, they start getting heavier. You get out to 9 feet, especially, and they start really giving you some sway.
Ooh, right.
Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people in the old days fished with those 9.5 feet rods all the time. With modern makers, a lot of us hollow build the rod, and I do that with my Pentas, where I scallop out quite a bit of the inside, and it lightens it up considerably from a solid rod. And so I make 8.5, even 9 foot rods, and they feel very comfortable to fish with.
Okay.
Now, if you're wanting a small stream rod where there might be a canopy to stay under, then a 7 foot is a nice length to go. 7.5. I even make them down to 6 feet. But to me personally, those aren't as comfortable to cast.
Grand Teton Fly Fishing is a premier guide service and fly shop that has access to some of the most coveted rivers and lakes in western Wyoming. Their simple goal is to share their valued resource and have you experience a native cutthroat trout rising to a single dry fly in the shadows of the Tetons. You can check out Grand Teton right now at grandtetonflyfishing.com. Let them know you heard of them through this podcast. The fish are moving and the runs are coming fast. Gear up for all your swinging adventures with the RS collection from Squala Fly Fishing. You can head over to squalafishing.com right now and use the coupon code WetFlySwing10 at checkout to get 10% off your first order. That's WetFlySwing10 at checkout to get 10% off. So if we were, I guess it depends on the stream, let's say you're fishing more all-around or even bigger water, where does the length, what does that give you when you get, say, the 9 foot versus the 8.5 foot? What are you getting for the fishing? What's the benefit?
Well, depending on, if it's larger water, and then depending on if you've got a lot of flat stretches or if you have pocket water. If you have flat stretches, 8.5 feet is a nice, pleasant one to cast. But if you've got a lot of pocket water where you need to reach out just a little further and touch a pocket, then a 9.5 might be a way to go.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so maybe the nymphing, you might go more with the 9 foot. And what about if you were just kind of swinging flies, wet flies, that sort of stuff, or even dry fly fishing? What do you think a good length on a bigger water would be?
I think the sweet spot for that would be an 8.5 foot.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Yeah.
And I make 8.5 foots in 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 weights.
There you go.
That's kind of the range that I'm specializing in.
Yeah, the 8.5 foot, right. Between 8 and 9 foot, the 6 weight, or in that range.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. And that's what I think Chris Korich mentioned on that episode. I think he was saying the 8.5 foot. In fact, I think he was talking about the story about Tim Rajeff, with Echo Rods. And Tim He said he came out with, it was a fiberglass rod. It was their badass glass, right? When they first came out, or actually I think it was before they came out. And it was, I think Tim made a 9-footer and Chris cast it and he was like, this is not going to work. It's too long. So basically he said, he had told, the master, Tim Ray Jeff, you should go shorter, I think is what he said. But so Tim went with, I think, the 8.5 foot. I think that is, I'll have to check that, but I believe that is a rod. So it feels like that's maybe the same thing with the fiberglass, that you have more weight, so the shorter rod is probably better.
I think so. There's a lot of parallels with the bamboo and the fiberglass. So I would tend to agree with that.
Okay, good. All right, so we're kind of narrowing this down now. We're looking at an 8.5 foot 6 weight, a 5 Penta rod. What else are we thinking about here? I guess you have, what are the other details? I guess you got grip and other things. What else should we talk about?
Well, at this point, it would be very difficult to talk about it more. What we would need to do is get together and actually cast a rod or two.
Oh, okay.
Let me look at the angler's casting style and see if the rod that I built is something that he's going to be able to work with. Okay. I have some friends who, they come over to my shop a lot. We go out and cast rods a lot. And there's a couple of them that just cannot seem to get any kind of rhythm going. And so I'm not sure what rod would be good for them still.
Right. Is that because their casting stroke they're just kind of all over the place, or?
It's just not smooth.
Yeah, not smooth.
Get this whipping action, which they're accustomed to with the graphite rods. They put it forward real quick, which is what you have to do to get it to bend. And to get them to slow down on that a little bit and get that cast smoother has just been very difficult.
Right, I can see that. So are you doing mostly in person, like the rod build, when you do these, are you meeting people locally?
Yeah, that's what I have done mostly. Now, I have sent a couple out of state where I never met the person, but they were old guys like me, so I figured they probably had been casting a while, the old school rods, and they seem to, the feedback I got has been good. So
yeah, so you didn't have to like watch them casting on a YouTube video or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Good. So, well, that'd be the next step then, would be probably to, figure it out on the cast style and stuff like that. I did see out there, I know Brandon, that was the cool thing about meeting Brandon and talking to him, is that he has a connection to Project Healing Waters, through his work, and just, I think he just has kind of the love of helping people. He's that type of guy, he's just into it. But so talk about that a little bit. What are you affiliated with Project Healing Waters, and talk about what you do there?
Yes, I've been a volunteer at the Fort Belvoir group here in Northern Virginia for 8 years now. And it's been one of the best endeavors of my life, I think. Getting to know these veterans who need some kind of, diversion, to keep the demons at bay. It's been great working with them. And I've worked with them in fly tying, fly casting. I've guided them on the streams. And then one of the things that I do with them also, if they want to, they can come here to my house and work in my shop, and we'll make a nice wooden rod tube. Or, in fact, you might have seen a couple of my rod tubes.
I did. They're amazing.
Or a net. We make a lot of landing nets here in the shop.
Oh, wow.
For the guys. And I don't sell landing nets, but we've made probably, at least a couple of dozen.
Oh, wow.
And it's of absolutely no cost to them.
There you go. So that's amazing. And yeah, that's what we hear, some of these stories. And we're doing an event with Project Healing Waters down in Arkansas in the White River this year. So we're doing a really cool, we're just kind of, putting things together now, but it's going to be exciting because I've never done anything personally, like, being there physically. So it's going to be cool to talk to some of the guys and things like that. And,
Are you working with the local group there at Mountain Home?
We're actually, so I'm working with kind of the main Project Healing Waters through the headquarters, but we will be working with, I think, the local groups as well.
Okay. Yeah, my cousin, Mike Stout, is in charge of the group there I don't know if it's Mountain Home or if it's...
Yeah, I can't remember. I know we're working with, so Ethan at Stonefly Nets, basically Ethan and I are working with Project Healing Waters. And I know when we talked to them last time, AJ said. He basically said, hey, we let the local group know, but I think because of the level, I think the scope and scale, because it's a little bit bigger, we're trying to get some stuff done, kind of, bringing together sponsors and things like that. So, but either way, the point is that it's going to be an event to basically, like you said, these veterans will be able to come and do this amazing trip, fish with some great guides, and just
Great.
yeah.
Well, when you're there, you'll probably see Mike Stout and his friend Paul Craig,
Okay.
and they're both bamboo rod makers too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they live right there on the White River.
Okay. Yeah. So, you're not too, well, I mean, you're far, but how far is it from where you are in Virginia to the White?
Oh gosh, it's like 1,200 miles.
Oh yeah. So it's a long ways. Yeah. Yeah. I always get my geographies off on the East Coast. That's right.
But I go there every October to the Southern Rod Makers Gathering right there on the White River at Cranor's Lodge.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of rod makers gathered there right there in October, and it's a great time.
It is.
We learn from each other, cast each other's rods.
Okay.
It's a good time.
So the Southern Rod Makers Gathering.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And this is where pretty much it feels like it's a pretty tight-knit community. You see these things around in fly fishing. You have, all these niches, right? Niches within a niche. But the fly rod builders, do you feel like it's a pretty big group of people, or do you feel like it's pretty small, like everybody's going to these events?
It's pretty small. There's rod gatherings in quite a few states every year. I go to one up in Michigan, and I go to one in Arkansas. There's one in the Catskills every year, but I'm usually in Alaska fishing at that time. But there's probably maybe 1,200 bamboo rod makers in the United States right now.
1,200.
Yeah.
And how do you know that number?
It's an estimate.
It's just estimate. Yeah, 1,200.
It's an estimate based on how many people go to the gatherings.
Okay.
And how many people are involved in the Classic Fly Rod Forum, etc.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, that might be per state. Yeah, maybe 20 people, something like that per state on average.
Yeah, not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. Okay, so you go down to these, so the Southern Rod Maker Gathering, and then people, just basically get to know people, see what other people are doing. What are some of it sounds like I hadn't heard of the different styles, the Penta and the Quad. Are there some other things people are doing in the bamboo space that are new and maybe different from the old school style rods?
Yeah, there's a guy up in Canada. His name is Marcel Duval, and he makes a very interesting rod. It's got 6 strips, but it's triangular in shape and hollow. And 3 of the strips are really, really tiny. The other 3 are pretty wide. And so I think he calls it the EVO or something like that. And I'm not sure what that stands for.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the most unique thing I've seen people working on.
It is. And what do you think the reason, what is that doing different than, say, the 5 strip or the 6?
I wish I knew. I really
yeah.
I really don't.
Right.
Oh,
right.
But there is one of my rod maker friends that has inspired me is Rob Smith of Pentalux rods.
Okay.
And he makes a 5-sided rod using 3 different shaped triangles. So it's not a perfect pentagon. And he says that he gets very accurate as well as a good backbone. He thinks it's a more accurate rod. And I think what he's doing is out there. He's the only one doing that. I think he's patented that process.
Oh, he has?
Yeah. Very, very interesting.
Right. Yeah. I'm looking at it on his website now, the Pentalux rods.
Yeah.
I'm looking at, he's got the differences, Pentalux T, traditional Penta, Pentalux S. And as I look at them, I can't tell whether they look the same to me since I'm not knowledgeable. But
yeah, if you look closer for a while, you'll start to notice some differences.
Yeah. Right. Wow. And does the bamboo nowadays, is it coming from the same place, or where do you get your bamboo?
It's coming from China. There's a specific region called the Guangdong province, or it's in the Guangdong province. And it's about a 40 square mile region of hillsides that get fairly sustained high winds, almost hurricane level a lot of times. And that bamboo, whose Latin name means the lovely reed, grows up very strong against that wind. And then we have one broker right now in the United States. He's actually working now with sweetgrass rods and working with Glenn Brackett in Twin Bridges, Montana. But he's our broker, and he goes over to China every few years and hand selects bamboo, gets it packed in a container, and then has it sent to Montana. And without him, I don't know what we would do now. There used to be, 3 or 4 brokers, but now it's down to him.
Oh, wow. So one person for the entire, so anybody who's making high quality bamboo, or they're going through this guy.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
There's another species that's being harvested in Vietnam, and it's wild grown instead of plantation grown. But there's only one guy so far that is harvested, and he's a guy out of Germany. And some rod makers in the United States are experimenting with that, and it's pretty good reports so far.
Nice. So there are some options. And could you take, this is probably a silly question, but if you had, bamboo grows like a weed all over the place. What's the difference if you just take some, bamboo from wherever? What would be the difference, using that versus this specific place?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because a lot of people say, hey, I got all kinds of bamboo.
Right. I got growing in my backyard right now.
But the bamboo that comes out of China has a very thick, what we call the power fiber layer. And that's out at the edge of the bamboo, right below the enamel, that surface on it is the strongest part of the bamboo. And if they come from the United States, local, even the same species that we use, if it's grown here in the United States, it just doesn't grow that thick power fiber layer. And we need that to be, at least 1/8 of an inch thick. And most of what you get, like that they use for tomato steaks and stuff, is probably like a 32nd of an inch. And so people have built rods with that, but they've used a lot of bamboo because they've had to laminate,
Oh, a lot more.
6 or 7 layers of that to get
Gotcha.
a thick bamboo.
Right. So what you're doing with this bamboo is you pretty much, is it one layer per side?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's one layer. So you can just, okay.
Yeah. And it's an amazing material. It's very resilient.
It's durable, right? Could you drive a car over, I've heard this, right? You could drive a car over a bamboo rod and maybe not break it. Is that true?
That is true if it's solid built.
Oh, solid built. So without hollowing it out, or what would be a solid built?
Without hollowing it. Yeah. So I'd appreciate it if nobody tried that with my rods.
Yeah. Right. So don't try that at home. What about the older school bamboo? Let's just say, before fiberglass, before graphite rods, when they were all bamboo. What were those rods like? Have you ever seen any of those?
I have, and they were great. Well, there were some rod makers that made really great bamboo rods, like Leonard,
right,
Dickerson.
Yeah. What is that Leonard rods? Do you know much of the history in the bamboo?
A little bit.
Hiram, like the rod makers?
Yeah, Hiram Leonard was one of the first ones to sell commercially, and he was one of the first to make a hexagram rod.
Oh, okay.
And I'm surprised he didn't do other geometries like a Penta, because he had a mill, and all you have to do if you have a mill is change the cutter angle. But he made hex rods, and he made very fine rods. And several of the people that were in his shop went on to make their own companies and make very fine rods as well, like Payne and Edwards, a couple more. I can't. Teton. Yeah.
Oh, right. If you look at those Leonard rods, are they, as far as the hollowing and the whole style of the rod, is it pretty similar to what you do?
No. They made hex rods, and Leonard didn't hollow the rods.
Okay.
So his were solid, and he even made really long, like 12, 13-foot salmon rods, and take a 2-piece solid salmon rod and try to cast that.
Wow.
That's back when men were men still.
Right. That was not easy. And he didn't hollow either. Is that because they didn't have the quality, or they didn't have the technology?
I don't know if they had the inkling.
Yeah, just too much work.
Or even just hadn't considered it.
Oh, right.
I don't really know.
Sure.
But it does add quite a dimension, to the process. So if he had thought of it, he probably thought, we don't need to. We've already got great rods.
Yeah, we got the best rod. There's no reason to change it up.
Yeah.
This year, I ventured into the heart of eastern Idaho's Yellowstone Teton territory where the fish were larger than life and the waters held the secrets of the best fly fishing out west. With crystal clear rivers like the Henry's Fork and the South Fork of the Snake and enough lakes to keep you going all year long, make your way to Yellowstone Teton territory and embark on a journey to one of North America's finest fly fishing destinations. It's time to experience eastern Idaho for yourself and support this podcast at the same time. Do you find bamboo rod making do you see it kind of going up and down, increasing? And it seems to me like it's been increasing in popularity. Do you see that out there?
It has been increasing in popularity probably for the last 30 years. It was kind of hush-hush, and the rod makers who were out there doing it didn't talk to each other much about their processes until Everett Garrison met up with a man named Hoagie Carmichael. And Hoagie ended up writing a book along with Garrison on the process of making a rod at home. And that kind of set off a snowballing effect of home shops starting to make their own bamboo rods. And I think that's really what spurred it on.
Oh, and is that a master's guide to building a bamboo fly rod?
It is, yes. That really got the snowball effect going. And then there's been several other books written on the subject since then.
Yeah, that's it. Just slowly, and probably with social media and things like that, just right, like everything.
Oh yeah. Social media, I think, has really exponentially increased that, really sped it up. And I know for me, I get a lot of ideas by going on Facebook or on the forums and, seeing what the guys are doing out there. And I think some are getting some ideas from me, especially on my rod tubes. I've been more known for the rod tubes than my rods.
Right. Yeah. The rod tubes. So you make those out of what are those made out of?
Hardwoods, all kinds of different hardwoods. I use a lot of maple and walnut. Those I think make the prettiest ones, but I also like mulberry.
Okay. Yeah, those are beautiful. And you don't see as many wooden rod tubes out there. Do you see others when you're traveling around?
I do see some. Most people use aluminum rod tubes because most makers don't get into the wooden rod tubes also. And I have to admit that I started doing the wooden rod tubes because I've been a woodworker for a long time. And it's actually cheaper for me to make one than to buy an aluminum one.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Right. Yeah, the old school.
I have the process down. It doesn't take me long at all to make one.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What's your woodworking? Have you been doing this your whole life?
Yeah, I took wood shop in high school, and that got me started. Always done small projects, not big projects. I made a desk in high school, and I made a couple of small tables since then. But other than that, small projects.
Yeah, small projects. Yeah. The wood shop, going back to my wood shop days, Mr. Woody, was that junior high or high school? I think that was high school. But it's funny about that stuff, right? I mean, that's a big influence. I mean, I never became a rod maker. Well, I actually have built some rods, but not in the bamboo. But that stuff leaves, right? I mean, for you, it sounds like your rod or your wood shop helped you for a lifelong love. Is that kind of how it looked for you?
Absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, and you became a teacher, which is not an easy job. You hear about a lot of stories about, teachers, the fact that it's the most important thing, right? One of the most important jobs in the country, teaching our kids, yet there's struggles with people getting benefits and high enough salary. What do you feel like your teacher? It seems like an amazing job. But did you love it? Was it challenging?
I did love it. It took me a long time to get my math degree. I worked in college as a mechanic and then got started teaching when I was 31. And then I only taught for 23 years when I retired. My wife let me retire early.
Nice.
She has a career that has allowed me to do that. And but as a teacher, I really did love it. I taught math, and I taught higher level math courses like calculus and trigonometry. And
for high school?
Yeah. I loved being in the classroom with the kids, got a lot of energy off of them.
Yeah.
Just had a great time doing it. But a year before I retired, I had a leg injury. And so my last year was just agony.
Oh.
And so I talked my wife into letting me retire, and thankfully she was okay with that.
God, so you did it. So you retired, 54?
55.
Wow, 55. There you go. That's really good. Nice. And like a lot of times you hear these stories, people retire and then you're working maybe as much as you were before. Do you find yourself doing that, or how do you balance that with the working versus, I guess, fishing?
Well, I just considered all of it as being active. I love getting out fishing. I don't do it as much as I would like to, but I do spend a heck of a lot of time in my shop, and mostly with the rods and rod cases now. I do some wood turning, turn bowls and stuff, but mostly it's the rod making, and I love that.
Yeah, awesome. We got a little segment here. We're going to take it out of here pretty quick. This is kind of our trip shout out segment. And today, this is a perfect part because you mentioned Alaska. We're heading up there with FishHound expeditions. We're going to be doing actually kind of off the road. We're going to be driving up, and we're not flying. Well, we're flying to Anchorage, but other than that, we're going to be on the road system.
Nice.
And the cool thing is Brandon, who we mentioned earlier, is going to be there on that trip along with some other people. So we're going to be hitting some big rainbow trout, and it's going to be a really cool trip. So I want to give a shout out to FishHound Expeditions. Adam is doing some great stuff there with conservation and everything. But for you, what does that look like? You mentioned Alaska. Do you go up there every year? Do you have a specific spot, or are you going to different places?
Yeah, I go up every year. I go with one of the friends from Project Killing Waters here.
Mm-hmm.
And we always have 4 guys. It's always him and me for the last 5 years. But then the other 2 switch out a lot. But we go to Prince William.
Okay.
Prince of Wales Island.
Oh, Prince of Wales.
Prince of Wales Island. And we're in September, so that's when the silver salmon are running, the cohos. And I take my 9-foot, 9-weight bamboo rod up there and just...
Really?
Yeah.
So you do it all with the bamboo rod?
Yeah. I throw streamers with their barbless, and just, it's unbelievable, the action.
Yeah. So this is Southeast Alaska.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost obscene.
Yeah, you get a lot of it. Is this in what you're in there, and is this kind of like August, September, somewhere in there?
September.
Yeah. September. That's kind of the peak, right? Coho start running August, September, October. Is that the range?
Yes, that's exactly the range.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay, so you guys fly in. Where do you fly into for Prince Wales? What?
We fly into Ketchikan.
Oh, Ketchikan. Okay.
And then we catch a little hopper over to the island.
Yep, to the island. Right. Wow. So coho. Any other during that time? What other species are out there?
Well, it's full of pink salmon.
Yeah, pinks.
And we probably hook up with twice as many pinks as we do cohos, which is fine. You're up there and you're looking for the cohos, and you hook a 6-pound pink, and when you realize it's a pink, you're going, oh crap.
Yeah.
But it's a 6-pound fish.
It's a fish. Yeah. And these aren't like scummy fish, right? These are pretty bright fish that are coming in.
Well, the pinks are on the backside of their spawning.
Okay. Oh, right. They're earlier.
Yeah. But when the cohos coming in, they're fresh. And so you really want them because, we take 50 pounds home every year.
Yeah.
But it's just funny. If I hooked a 6-pound fish up here in the Shenandoah River, I would be ecstatic.
Right. Yeah.
But you hook up with 30 of those pinks in a day, and you're going, oh man, another one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's all relative, right? The pinks.
So Rob and I tried to change our attitude. It's like, just enjoy every fish. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, exactly. No, I hear you. I had the same. Actually, we do our steelhead school, the Skeena River, which isn't too far. I think it's down south of there a little bit, up in Canada. But it's steelhead. Obviously, we were there for steelhead, and I caught a amazing coho that I thought was a steelhead. When I got it in, I was kind of like the same thing. Although that fish was so bright and it tore me up so well that I was loving it. But yeah, you kind of get your targeted species, just like even where you were at, right? Virginia, you're going in the backyard, you've got brook trout and brown trout. I mean, do you have a species out there that you're fishing for most of the time?
It usually turns out to be rainbow trout in some of the lower rivers coming out of the mountains. Occasionally, I have been up into the Shenandoahs to catch the wild brook trout. I haven't done that as much as I should because they're fun.
Yeah, they are.
But I really like floating the Shenandoah or Rappahannock rivers for smallmouth.
Yeah,
great time.
Right. Yeah, the smallies. A lot of people say that's like their favorite fish, right?
They're fantastic.
Yeah.
And then we also in April, March and April, we have the shad that run up the rivers here. And, out west, you think of shad, a lot of times you're thinking of minnows. These are like the American or hickory shad that are,
Pretty big.
12 to 14 inches long. And they're great fun. They come up in pods, and sometimes you can catch 50 in a day.
Wow.
So we go out for those every spring.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun.
God, that's great. Yeah. Virginia, I think I didn't realize it before we had headed there that there's a ton of resources. In fact, we have a link, a webinar we did with the Mossy Creek Fly Shop, Colby. It was good. He kind of covered all the different areas to fish and species.
Yeah.
And it's pretty diverse.
Yeah. I floated the Shenandoah once with Brian Crow.
Oh, you did?
Colby's brother.
Yeah. For smallmouth?
Yeah. He's the best guide I think I've ever floated with.
No kidding.
Yeah. That was just fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Great time.
That's right. So Colby, I think, kind of does a lot of the office stuff. And I think Brian is more that does a lot of the guiding, right? Well, they got a whole guide team, but of the brothers. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that was Mossy Creek was cool. And obviously Mossy Creek itself is amazing. And there you go. There's the Project Healing Waters event as well. I think they raise a ton of money, and that's one of the best events you hear a lot about down there on Mossy Creek. Yeah.
That's a great tournament. We send our guys down there for that. Not all the time, because it's a national invitational. So
it is.
We don't always get a slot from Fort Belvoir, but when we do, the guys have a great time.
Oh, right. So this is more. So that's higher level. Like you actually have a whole system set up where you apply to be part of the invitation, or however that works.
Right. Yeah. For the participants. Yeah.
Yeah. Participants.
Us volunteers are not invited to the Mossy Creek Invitational.
Right. Yeah, because it's all set up. It's basically you have
they've got their guides and everything.
Yeah, they got their guides. Nice. Right on. Well, anything else before we get out of here, Chris? Like just on the rod. I mean, I think we got the perfect rod that I'm looking at, the 608, 8.5 foot, and I guess. But anything else you want to touch on with your rods, or that people should be knowing about bamboo before we head out of here?
Well, as for my rods, I make rods from 3 weight up to 9 weight, so they cover quite a spectrum of types of fishing. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me and talk about it, I'm certainly willing to. They don't have to buy a rod from me, but I'd certainly love talking to them about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be, at the end of this week, I'll be at the Virginia Fly Fishing and Wine Festival.
Oh, yeah. When does that start up?
That starts on Friday.
Oh, wow. Friday. Let's see. So what's the date there?
On the 9th of this month.
January 9th.
This Friday. And I've got a table down there, so if anybody's in the Virginia area that hears this, I'd sure like to meet you at the show. Come on by. Well, you can cast a couple of my rods.
Yeah. And I think this show, or this episode, probably will go live after that show. But the good thing is that come next year, if you're at the show again, and this episode will live out there, people can still connect with. Do you try to do the Virginia show every year? Yeah,
this is my second year.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it last year, so if I get some orders off of this show, I'll probably do it again. So
yeah. Bo, we've had Bo on a few times. He's an amazing guy, and again, Project Healing Waters, right? He wrote a book,
fantastic
book where he interviewed some veterans and just told some of the stories, and he talked about that on this podcast, and it was very emotional. Lots of tears and things like that about just a great guy. Do you know Bo a little bit?
Yes, I do. Yeah. He's a friend. And
oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a very great book that he's done, and he's done so much for veterans in this area. In fact, he's kind of reaching out, with veterans all across the country now with that book and going and meeting them. And I just really appreciate what he does for our guys.
Yeah, definitely. Nice, Chris. Well, I think we can leave it there for today. Like we said, we'll have a link out there to your phone number, your email, so people can connect with you. And I think, obviously the rods, but also the rod case you mentioned. I mean, I think now, but do you sell, if somebody wanted one of those wood rod cases, do you make those for people?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody just wanted a case and maybe not, would you be able to do that?
Sure.
Yeah, good. Okay. Before we get on the cost, this is another, I was just thinking about, what is typically a rod of bamboo? What do your rods cost? What do they typically cost to get a custom-made bamboo rod like this?
Well, a two-piece rod, which I mostly make, those are $1,900.
Yeah, $1,900. Okay.
And then if you want a 3-piece, those are $2,100.
Yeah, 3 pieces, 20. Okay. And then the 3 pieces versus the 2 pieces, just
Packability.
Packability. Yeah. Is there a limit? Can you go down to a 4-piece or even a shorter on those, or is 3 about it?
You can go to a 4-piece, but because of the ferrule construction, where you put them together, it starts to get kind of heavy. So I've made a 4-piece, and it's an 8-footer, but it's got a lot of sway to it.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever come close to breaking a rod on those salmon up there in Alaska?
Oh, I've broken, I think, 3 rods.
Oh, you have? You've broken 3. What was that like? Broken them on a fish?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so each time I go back and, readjust my construction for the next salmon rod. The one I have now, I've used for 2 years. And so I'm doing pretty good.
Doing good.
Did break one just last September.
Yeah.
But that one was my own fault.
Right.
But yeah, breaking them is a lesson, and that I don't get too upset about it because I know a guy, I just go and make another one.
Yeah. Not too big of a deal. Right. Yeah. You're testing the gear out.
Right. And
good stuff.
I enjoy testing it out and taking them to their limits just to see what bamboo will do.
Yeah. That's fun. Nice. Awesome, Chris. Well, I think we could leave it there. We will, like I said, we'll have links in the show notes for everybody. And this has been really cool. Hopefully, maybe we'll get to connect with you. I'll definitely hear some stories from Brandon up in Alaska. That'll be a good question. I'm not sure if he's got an Alaska rod. That would be something that would be interesting to, because we're going to be fishing for big rainbows. And I think, we'll be there in a little bit earlier. So I'm not sure if the coho will be in, but there'll be some other species around.
When are you going?
So we're going to be there, I think it's, I want to say later in July. I think it's towards the end of July.
Okay. And what weight rods will you be taking with you?
So I think we're taking like 6 weight because there's going to be some, the grayling, dolly varden, stuff like that. And then also probably 8 weights, I guess, 7 or 8 weight for salmon.
Okay.
I think that's what we're going to be doing.
We'll have to see about sending a rod or 2 with them.
Yeah, well, and one thing, the other thing we got going too is we're heading up to Togiak with another trip to fish for Chinook. Yeah, and the Togiak has a good run of Chinook out of the Bristol Bay. But that's have you ever thought, because that's another level, could you build a rod for a Chinook?
I think I could.
You could?
I think I could.
Okay. Yeah, it's extreme, but think about that. That'll be something maybe down the line we could connect with. I'm sure other people have tried it. Yeah. But that's also the spay game too, so it's a whole nother.
I'm just imagining the one Chinook that I caught, 30 some years ago. It was like pulling a log out of the water.
Yeah, that's what it is. Think steelhead is crazy, but these Chinook are bigger and they can just go, right? They're just gonna you might not be able to stop the fish. You might have to chase them in the boat. That's kind of what you're looking at.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Good.
Cool.
All right, Chris. Well, thanks again for your time. We'll be in touch and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Dave. I enjoyed it.
All right. Quick reminder, call to action for you. You check in with Chris right now. He said it himself. He loves talking rods. Even if you're not going to pick one up, just pick his brain. You can shoot him an email or give him a call, 703-772-2958, and let him know you heard about this podcast. It sounds like he listens to some podcasts out there. So if you're interested in bamboo rods, I've seen Chris's rod. It's beautiful. The rod cases, the bamboo or the wood rod cases are amazing. And so check it out right now. If you haven't yet already, you want to get the next episode into your box, follow this show. You can do it really quick on Apple Podcasts. Click that plus button. Quick reminder, we're heading to the Steelhead School. You can check in with me, Dave, at wetflyswing.com if you're interested in that trip. This is going to be out to the Skeena Spay Lodge with Jeff Liskay. John McMillan's going to be there. We got a whole crew. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you want to get first access to that, you can check in with me and I'll let you know availability. And that's probably where we'll leave it today. If you have any questions for me or if you haven't checked in, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email anytime, especially if you're brand new to this show, Dave at wetflyswing.com. And I'm going to let you get out of here. Thanks for stopping in and hanging out to the very end of the show. Hope you have a great morning, great afternoon, or an excellent evening. And we'll see you on that next episode. Talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.